Hey, what's up YouTube? I figured I would just go on a bit of a walk around the land and do a little update, show you kind of how this place looks like in the wintertime. It's about all I can do right now. Do some observations on the land, where water's going, where snow's building up, and how I can improve my site for the next couple years to come. Get some long-term planning happening and kind of show you my thought process when I'm walking around looking for improvements I can make on my food forest. So if that sounds fun, stick around, come for a walk. So part of this video is just going to be kind of enjoying the beautiful snow that's happening right now on the property. But standing here, I wanted to kind of talk to you about something that I have on my property that is a problem, and I want to turn it into a solution. And that is this artesian well. So we have our artesian well outlet coming up here, and this was inherited from the old owners. They just dug a pond and it over a tiny little holding pond, and it overflows right here and then goes down a valley that the water over 30 years would have cut a valley, this little trench valley down through the local low point on the hill until it got into the roots of the trees and somewhat got the bed stabilized. And then it just used to soak the rest and bottom half of my property. It's this artesian well that I then channel into the wetland stream down there that I cut to try to slow the water down, take it across the hill as much as possible, back and forth, and then into a lower holding pond where then I continue it down and weave it across the hill until it gets down into the actual final riverbed where it flows all the time. One improvement I do want to make on this property, however, is to try to keep this water. This is a good lesson for anyone that has any kind of water, even just heavy rains, that you want to capture. What you really want to do is try to keep the water as high on your land for as long as possible and then spread it out on the land. So what I really want to do with this is, instead of having it overflow and run quickly downhill, I want to take it and spread it high across my land as much as possible. It will still go down there eventually, but what I really want to do is cut a level swale right across and connect it. For those of you who know my property a bit because you watch my videos, these are 3 swales that I've built and connected into these swales, and turn these swales more into a constant flow riverbed and less into water catchment swales. At the same time that I'm out here doing these observations, I'm always looking for wildlife foot traffic. This is typically where the deer come up, and so far it seems like they've moved on. They're leaving this swale and these trees alone. And this bramble patch seems to be kind of successful, but at the same time, looking at it, it's not as thick as I'd like. So I'm gonna really focus on thickening up this bramble patch. Raspberries are great, but I think sea buckthorn and more thorny species will actually help me out more. So this is an observation that I'm making right now. And in the spring, I'm going to be planting more thorny stuff in this deer entrance path. Now, getting back to these swales here, the idea behind these swales was that all the rain that's hitting this land will there's a ridge. You kind of can't see it, but there's a ridge that kind of cuts through here. And half of it will grade down away to the edge of the property, which is that tree line, and then eventually make its way into the artesian well overflow. The other half will sheet across the land this way and then run down the hill. So it's this sheeting rain coming off the house. There's an overspout on the front corner of the house there. And then another one, and there's another one that comes on the, sorry about that, on the corner of this house here and runs to the front and joins up. These roofs here will join together and then overflow here. And then it goes down across the land. So what I want to do is capture more of this rainwater and send it both into the trees I have here as well, and then cut a small little berm and then direct it here into these swales, where I then slow it and spread it across the hill based on these swales and hold it. Especially for when this snow melts. This is a tremendous water resource that people in cold climates often don't think of, capturing, holding snow and spring melt. But that can really help your system get kick-started when the snow melts in the spring. So if I can spread this swale out and stop the water that is bypassing the swale down this pathway and capture that as well, and then join this whole area all the way across into this water catchment swale, then I can really hold a ton of water. And then the other food forest is up on the other side of this hill over here. And what I want to do is try to join those two together. So let's go walking. Okay, so I'm in between two swales right now. And the elevation of this swale that I'm walking on right now is roughly the top of the pond tarp, which is going to be covered when the pond is done. But it's roughly that elevation. So if I carry water across this pond here, roughly where I am now, it enters a little valley here and then shoots off down into there. This swale here, the lower swale where I am underneath, used to go kind of across this hill, but in building the pond, this hill was built up, and so now it's going to end up being blocked. So the swale that I'm on now is going to have some kind of waterfall overflow with rock, really well rocked in to prevent erosion, taking it down to the lower swale. This is basically going to be what's called an overflow sill. And it'll get into this lower swale, and I may drop this lower swale down and create a third swale, or fourth swale, I guess, underneath it. Now, typically swales should be spread out a little further than this, but I do need to get lower because I need to get around this hill. At the very least, what I'll do is I'll drop it down here and I'll rock in and channel an actual downgrade flowing river and catch it back on the other side of this hill. Let's actually walk down in there. Oh, I'm caught. All right. So this is a cedar hedge that I have, and you can see I've come in here and trimmed up some of the trees just so I could get in and around, but I dropped the trees down, dropped the branches down to basically try to simulate, falling trees that a natural forest would do. What I'm going to try to do down here is potentially open up this space so that I can see these apple trees. These are some of the trees that I grafted onto. I graft late season holding apples. I don't think I've even ever taken this channel down here. Okay, so where are we right now? The house is up the hill. The three swales that I don't often show you with the cherry trees are up on this hill. The bramble bush is down here. The pond is built here, and there's a hill here, and the lower pawpaw area is there. And then kind of my more famous is a terrible word, the more well-documented food forest is up on the top of that hill. So that's where we are. Down here, we actually have a lot of wild apple trees. And I don't think I've ever shown you guys these. These are monstrous apple trees. it's these trees that I graft onto. Mostly the ones that border this pathway here. And this one here. Sorry, not this one, the one behind it. This actually isn't an apple. The ones behind it here are apples, and I graft onto these with the late season holding fruit. Now this whole little cluster is a bunch of wild apple trees that look stunning in the spring, but I never get to see them. There's also beautiful sumacs that in the fall would be gorgeous, but I never see them because they're essentially shaded out by just a very few amount of giant cedar trees. Now, I don't dislike trees, and I don't dislike cedars necessarily, especially when they're co-mixed with stuff, but this is a south-facing hill. This whole hill is south-facing, and these cedar trees are shading it all out. So what I'm thinking of doing is cutting these cedar trees down, releasing light to the back of that south-facing hill so that I can expand the food forest and plant more trees. These cedar trees, well, let me tell you why I think that's a good idea. So we were standing in there and we walked around here, and I'm going to look at it now. We're facing roughly south east right now. This house south is pretty much right that way, and these cedar trees are completely blocking the sun to a south-facing hill. These cedar trees are beautiful. They're big. They are trees. I don't like cutting trees down, but they're done sequestering carbon. They're not going to really store much more carbon. I can harvest these. I can sell the crop of wood for some money, hopefully. I can trim the branches up and make biochar with them. And then in their spot, they will release light to a bunch of hardwood trees that are struggling to grow underneath those trees. And then I can further sow more trees in. The new young trees are going to sequester, they're going to take over and continue to sequester carbon. Right now, these trees are kind of all done their job. So harvesting trees is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's got to be done responsibly. I could have clear cut that whole hill in the last couple years, but I've been trying to slowly cut down trees instead, cut down 10 or 12 trees a season, and then sow straight into them with new trees, instead of clearing my land in one fell swoop, leaving it bare, and basically just, taking that carbon and not replacing with something else that's going to sequester carbon. But there's some beautiful hardwood trees that I'll like to release light to, and then the swales will kind of come across. And once this lower area of the pond is completed, what I would like to do is continue the swale down along this front side. The rainwater catchment from the side of the house, which runs across the eaves and down, will get captured and put into the pond. When the pond overflows, the reservoir is down at the bottom here, and there's an underground reservoir there. On days where we get tons and tons of rain, it's going to fill up and overflow. I don't know what that looks like yet, so I want to see what that looks like, but it'll overflow down here. That water I want to capture. I don't want to just let it go. The plan with that water now is to take it down this hill and just feed it into the lower river area at the bottom here. The problem is that our goal when we're building food forest systems is to try to get as many uses out of water as possible. So when I capture that water, put it into the pond, feed fish, feed the aquatic pond life with it, and it overflows, I want to get that harvest again and capture it. So as high up as possible on this hill, what I want to do is cut in another swale. Try to capture that water and spread it and take it right across this hill here. Okay, another site orientation. Pond is here, house is there, 3 swales are there. My wild apple trees are down here. My famous food forest is up at the top of that hill. This coppice area is the sumac coppice. My kitchen garden is down this hill here, and the pawpaw food forest is here, and it's bordered with apples on all sides. So that's where we are. that kitchen garden and the pawpaw area are both lower elevation than where I am right now. So me capturing, sorry for swinging the camera, me capturing this water and sending it across the hill will allow this coppice area here of sumac to be uphill of a stored water source where they can dig roots in to whatever depth they want to access any water. I can optionally cut another small swale in slightly higher, capture some of the water that lands on the upper area, feeds the swales on the top, but then overflows. I'll be able to capture that again and spread it and get another use out of it. And then I would like to cut this swale right across through this poison ivy patch. This, if you see my summer videos, I have these tarps down because this whole area is just a patch of poison ivy. I've tarped it, hopefully killed the poison ivy, and I can cut a swale through here. I can cut it before the poison ivy comes up in the spring and hopefully get out of there before I get any leaves. Touching the roots I don't believe is too bad for the urushiol oil, but even if I wear gloves and everything, I can probably handle it. So I'd like to cut that water across, and I'm still at a high enough elevation where I should be able to continue the swale to my kitchen garden here. Possibly wrap it once or twice and then send it back, send it down this area, have it overflow into a lower swale, and then send the last swale along the edge of this river, very shallow but wide swale into the pawpaw area. And then eventually that will overflow back into the lower river. Now once we're down here in this lower area, we can get another use out of the water. And here's a really important part, how we can then turn the water into plants, and then turn the plants into fertilizer, and then take that fertilizer and carry it way uphill and back into the food forest. So let's show you what that looks like. This swale will now continue down this lower area into the pawpaw area, and what I'm going to do is build a small little wetland down in the lowest possible spot. So I've gotten maximum use out of that water. I'm going to take some of these rain barrels that I have. This is like an early experiment on rain barrels, before I did any kind of math on catchment area and how long it takes a rain barrel to fill up. Stupid, right? Very stupid. But I can use that and use this well oxygenated tumbled water from the pond, and I can make a wetland guild down here in the bottom area. I've showed this before. This is a failed experiment on where I originally set my composting up at a location far away from the house that is not very useful in the wintertime. I've since integrated the high use areas into the zone 1, which is the areas close to my property. But I did notice that this area floods because it's very low. So all the catchment from the land and the water runoff all the way up on the top of my hill ends up coming into this area and flooding, and then will eventually overflow down into the river here. This is the stream that runs along the side of my property. This is about as low as I can get. So what I'd like to do down here is, once I've wound the swale all the way along, overflowed it into a lower swale, ran that all the way around the kitchen garden, possibly cutting right through the kitchen garden, down in the lower pawpaw area, possibly having to go down to another swale that cuts back in here. It will run and then backfill into a pond area where all along the perimeter of the pond I can grow stuff like comfrey, nutrient accumulating plants. I can compost, and I can grow plants all in here, and I can turn that water and nutrient into green material. I will then take those rain barrels, put them in here, and ferment them, possibly with a bubbler if I can get power down here, possibly just anaerobic, and then I will bubble it to finish it. But I will turn that nutrient and those plants, chopping and dropping the plants, putting them on my property, chopping the plants, putting them into a compost tea manure, a comfrey manure, and then I can carry that water physically with my body in jugs back up to the top of the hill, get a workout, and recycle that water now uphill and get another use out of it as a fertilizer, and then turn that water into peaches and apples. In this way, every drop of rain that comes off my house that wants to flow out of my land is captured, stored, spread across my property as much as possible, converted into trees, converted into food. When it finally gets to the bottom, it's going to feed wildlife in a small little holding pond. And then before it leaves my land, I'm going to turn it into as much plant material as possible, scoop out the water into the buckets, turn it into fertilizer again, and then send it back uphill. I could pump it uphill, but I don't want to use actual electricity. I just want to use my human power and turn it into fertility, turn it into apples, turn it into food, and maximize the amount of water that I get, the amount of uses of the water that I get from every drop of water that falls on my land and every bit of snow that falls on my land. So thanks for watching. If you got anything useful out of this video, hit subscribe, hit like, and I will see you on the next one. And a fun thing for you to watch might be to see how much of that I actually get done. I have a tendency to overthink, to dream big. Reality is I work 40 hours a week and have 3 kids and a wife, and I'm busy, so it'll be fun to see how much of that I can get done this year. But always dream big and have big plans. Might take me 10 years to do that. I might be able to get it done next year. I might rent equipment to kind of dig it quick, but it might take me a while to do it. That's okay. The plan's there, and I hope I can get it done. So come with me and watch and see how much I can get done in the next couple years. Thanks again.